Maybe let's go back to the beginning, back to where it all began, and just talk about how we got connected, sort of where we went from there. I feel like you reached out to us. Is that true?
Yeah. I had just been creeping on the internet looking for things because
as we do.
Right. I've really been interested in Black arts outside of like larger metropolitan areas, especially in the Midwest. So like outside of Chicago, St. Louis, Denver, things like that. And like, I want to know what does Black art look like in a town with like 50,000 people where the population of Black folks might be like 2, 3, 4, 5% and things like that. I don't know the population or the demographic necessarily of Iowa City. So it could be a huge Black population that I just never saw. I don't know.
No, that would be crazy.
And so I came across the Center for Afrofuturist Studies, and when I started to like dig deeper into like what you have been doing, it was just like, how have I not heard of this before? Like, so many of the artists that have been residents in the past, I either knew or knew of, and it was just like really amazing to see that like this seemingly like small DIY space in Iowa City was like bringing in so many amazing Black artists and doing like really incredible things, like really, I think, just like refreshing things. Because that's one of the reasons that like I was always interested in like Black art outside of major cities, is because sometimes you see similar things, or you get used to like the artists and the people that you see, which is like totally fine. But like I want to know like what's going on the off the cuff.
Can you speak to, I guess, your curatorial practice in general?
I'm not professionally trained as a curator. Like I didn't go to graduate school. I got like the first time I learned what a curator was, and like was my senior year in high school, actually, where I was lucky enough to get into this small little fellowship. It was really small at the time. It was the Kent Bellows Fellowship, which eventually worked out of the Bemis Center for Contemporary Art. And that's the first time I understood what the art world was beyond being an artist, because I had grown up with a mother who's an artist. So like that's what I thought the art world was. And getting into this fellowship, and then being given the trust, especially at such a young age, that now that I think about it, to kind of like take the work of people, of my peers, and kind of think about like how can their work that's already not resonating, but that's already has its own kind of like message and meaning within it. How can I take this work, put it together with other people's works, put it in a space, and like create not necessarily a larger message, but like a different way of looking at that message and like a different perspective, and like giving it like an environment to live within. And when I was still in Omaha, because that's where I grew up, I was able to do like small DIY projects because I had a lot of friends who were artists, and we didn't have like, spaces to do anything in, because at the time it was like heavily Bemis Center and Joslin Art Museum. And there weren't like DIY spaces. And so we just kind of put small things together. I tend to look for narratives in Black American culture, Afro-Caribbean, even like Afro-Latina, South American culture, things like that, just Blackness across the Americas in general, and even more specifically, Blackness across the Americas through the eyes of a queer person, or just the queer community in general, which is still an incredibly big expanse of like knowledge and culture and ethnicity and things like that.
Can you speak to your, Omaha as a cultural space for you growing up, and how that's compared to other Midwestern spaces you've been in, like Chicago or now Iowa?
So Omaha to me, it's an interesting city, even though I grew up there. It's like most Midwestern cities where it was heavily redlined, and it's heavily still segregated according to neighborhoods and things like that. But I think there's also this kind of like want and drive, which I think you see in a lot of Midwestern cities, even like the big one like Chicago, to really like stake a claim in something, and like have a oh God, I don't know like the best word for it, like have have a strong culture within your city, a city amongst the many cultures that are broken up already into the city, if that makes sense. It was interesting growing up in Omaha because there is like a very large socioeconomic gap within Omaha. And I grew up downtown, South Omaha, kind of. So I saw a lot of culture that I didn't understand was significant at the time, just because it was like always around you. And I realized as I got older, and like especially when I went into high school, so I was around more non-people of color. That doesn't sound right.
I like it. I think we should.
Okay, I was like non-people of color. It was like
yeah.
Non-POCs and people who were like grew up middle class or wealthy or things like that. And that's when I really started to appreciate the world I came from, because I realized that like they didn't have, even though we grew up 5-6 miles apart, they weren't exposed to different people and different cultures the way I got to be, just because I happened to live, in downtown Omaha.
So there was a Midwestern focus for the artists who are in the exhibition at CAS.
Yes, there was initially a Midwestern focus. So like when I came into the to the show with 2 artists that I wanted to bring in right away: Krista Franklin, who works in Chicago, and Francesca Lemaire, who is in Detroit. And with the open call, I was really hoping to get, more Midwesterns like Nebraska, more Iowa, which luckily Kieran Alfred sent in work for that. Minnesota, Wisconsin, I'm trying to think of Midwestern states. But we ended up getting a few other people from the Midwest, but we also got people from the coast who were living in California and New York, but were that came from the West Indies. Within the show, I thought it was really important to have both Black American and Afro-Caribbean, West Indian, however, like you specifically identify ethnically in that case, represented in the show. Because especially like with Francesca, she is Black American and Haitian, and Krista's work deals with a lot of Black Americana, but a lot of the work that was in this specific show dealt with Trinidadian folklore. And even myself, like as I go back into having an artistic practice, I'm heavily interested in like both my Black American and my Trinidadian side.
I mean, it's a pretty focused set of works. Like it's not, our gallery isn't huge, and so I think there was the kind of spatial constraint, but it also feels like you curatorially prioritized like choosing a smaller set of works that each had a larger impact.
Part of it was just luck in that a lot of the work that was sent in was smaller. Like the biggest physical piece was Krista Franklin's, and then of course Kiara's video was blown up to fill a wall, which I think was really beautiful. I wanted there to be a lot of intimacy. I like my shows to be intimate, and sometimes that literally means just having small kind of vignettes throughout the gallery.
Maybe you could speak to the title, Time Now for Ghosts, and the kind of conceptual overview.
So part of my thinking when I was putting the show together, and just like the concept of the show more so than like the actual works, was my thoughts about Afrofuturism in the natural world, and how that kind of, and in my mind, how it lends itself to like the inherent connection to like Black bodies and Black spirituality, whether it's like secular or religious or within any sense. In my mind, putting Afrofuturism and naturalism together is kind of like a call to the ancestors. It's kind of like understanding the future, the past, and the present at the same time, and kind of letting those realities collide to like understand yourself and where you may be going, where you might not be going, where you came from, things like that. So it was kind of like just like a call back to the ancestors. Like it's time for them to come and tell us what our future is, or even in other sense, it's time for like our descendants to come and tell us what our past is. So one of the artists that I talked to a lot was Ashley Page, who I was lucky enough to get connected with through Krista Franklin. Ashley's entire practice is just like phenomenal. Her piece in the show was Pupil State, which was the only more sculptural installation piece in the show. And I was really, really interested in that piece, all her pieces in that kind of series and her practice in general, because it brings together so many aspects of nature in like a non-specific way, I want to say. So like with that piece in particular, when we talked about it, because we were originally going to go with a different piece, but just, you know, the way things happened, we shipped out Pupil State. And there were a lot of similarities with like another piece that we were going to have in the show. It was a lot about the body as a vessel, both like, you know, just both like literally and just like figuratively as like a vessel. Like I was talking to her, I was telling her like how it made me think of like a vessel for like time and space within a condensed form. Another piece that I think people were really drawn to was Plants We Love, which was Kieran Alfred's series. I was really, really excited to learn more about her work, because I think it brought I think it grounded the show in a interesting kind of scientific way. Since Kieran's background is more of like botany and ethnography and things of that nature. The pieces were very simple. They were like just really beautiful prints with, you know, information about these plants that you find in Jamaica that she was always really interested in, and had a lot of cultural significance, just like being passed down through generations and things like that. Most of the other pieces in the show were heavily steeped in, I would say, like ancestral investigation and like mysticism and things like that. Kieran's pieces were like heavily of the physical world, like right now, and very tactile. So I think those were really interesting pieces to have in the show, that just really like highlighted how big and how almost overwhelming the thoughts of Afrofuturism in the natural world can be. It's not, you know, just this one narrow idea. And I really enjoyed having Liz Bree's piece in the show. She had the audio piece. I like having a really full experience, and like I like having tons of different kinds of mediums be represented. So like having that audio was really important to me, and just like the thought behind her practice was just really beautiful and just really raw, that I think it was needed in this show to kind of balance out kind of the lightness, I would say, of like the other pieces. So like in general, Liz's practice, at least with like her songwriting, is like she interviews Black women about their family histories and things like that. And from those conversations, she creates music out of them.
Some of the things that you were saying about Afrofuturism make me want to ask you about if you have hopes for the way that will go in the coming years. There have been so many different iterations and manifestations, and I think, you know, part of the CAST program is like holding space for all of those, you know, and not kind of choosing one over the others. But I think everyone comes with their own relationship to it and hopes for it.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if I could heavily speak on what I think it will become, because when I look through, I like to watch. Summer before last, I did like a small kind of Afrofuturism and sci-fi film series thing, and I wanted it to span decades. And so looking at like the movies that were considered Afrofuturist in the 50s, and then what the movies that are considered Afrofuturist now, is just like they're worlds away from each other. There are still like, you know, these like baseline things that you see, but they're worlds away from each other. And I don't know if I even have the capacity to really kind of see like where it could be going. I don't know if I can even say where I want it to go, because I think that is too limiting for myself, and to like the I never know if I should use the word genre for Afrofuturism, but like I do want people to let it be as expansive as Blackness is within itself. I do think there is like a tendency to, like, you know, when it's Afrofuturism, it's automatically space, which, I mean, I love space, but it's also like, you know, space, technology, things like that, and like kind of pushing towards the future. And I feel like Afrofuturism could be the now. It is the now. It could be a lot more, it could be as passive as it needs to be. Like, it could be as gentle as it needs to be. And it could be without the expectation of technological advancement. I think that's I think that is an interesting aspect of it. But I also think it's more than that, and I would hope that it continues to be able to reach out further and further and further as it continues to expand and twist and grow with Blackness in the present. I don't know if that answered the question at all.
No, it totally does. That was awesome. Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling.
Awesome.